Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here's your host, Amy Toner.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and today I have a special host, NATSO CEO and President, Lisa Mullings. You are listening to The Truck Stops Here, NATSO's podcast. NATSO is the National Trade Association for Truck Stops, and our mission is to advance the success of truck stops and travel centers, and this podcast is just one of the many ways that we do that. We have some special guests today. Do you want to introduce them, Lisa?
Yes, I'm really excited to have our guests today. We have John Pertchik, who is the CEO of TravelCenters of America. And we have the founder of TA, Mr. Phil Saunders. Thank you guys for being here with me today. Phil, I'm going to start with you. It's been 50 years now since you started TA. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the business and what gave you the idea to start this amazing travel center chain?
Well, originally when I started in it, I was working on the New York State Thruway. It had just opened up back in about 1954. And the truckers were stopping in there and they were saying, they opened this new road and there's nothing for us truckers. And so they kept talking about that. And I was working the night shift. So they would get bored and they'd stop in there. And I was going to college, so I was doing my homework and taking care of a customer, which was mainly a gas customer, about once every 30 minutes. Because when the road first opened, there was hardly any traffic on it at all. So that sort of got me the idea. And then my father and a couple of his friends, just by accident, had done an RSP in Rochester to build a small truck stop next to a new produce center they were doing in Rochester. So when it got built, for about 2 years, they suffered. It wasn't doing much business. And I was home from college and was telling them all I knew about the truckers, so on and so forth. So he said, well, you're so smart, why don't you come out down here and run it? Because they were about to close the thing up. So I came to Rochester and started running it. And early on, it was a very hands-on type truck stop. I would pump fuel, I would change tires, so on and so forth. So a lot of the drivers would talk to me about what they really needed. And they didn't really need a place in Rochester where they were done with a 2-day or a 3-day trip. Where they needed their places was in the middle of the run, so they could stop somewhere and get fueled up, get food, beverages, clothing, whatever they needed, then get back on the road. And back then, they also needed rooms. And we started out with bunk rooms, not a hotel room, just bunk room, maybe 5-6 guys sleeping in one room. So that sort of gave me the idea of taking it on the road and stepping it up a notch or two, and really started early on trying to call it travel centers rather than truck stops. And Lisa, if you remember, for many years, I fought the battle of trying to change it from truck stops to travel centers, which we finally got done. Took a lot of years, but we got it done. But that was sort of the embryo of it back in. And then when Ashland opened, that was in 1972. And that really is when the thing got converted to TravelCenters of America and started the journey towards the 50 years.
Now, I have to ask you, have things changed much in 50 years for the industry?
Oh, they've changed dramatically. I mean, the trucks are totally different today. A guy can get in a truck and drive for 10 hours in a very comfortable cab, sleeper bunk, so on and so forth. They really very few of the truck stops even have hotels anymore because there isn't that much of a demand for it. The driver has changed a lot also. When I first went in the business, they were guys out of World War II and out of the Korean War motor pool. And they all came out of the service and started driving truck. Today, you don't have too many of them. It's people that have either gone to driver training school or maybe worked on a farm and got a little bit of a feel for a truck at that time. But it's a totally different driver. It's a totally different highway system that he's on. And to give you an idea how the driver has changed, back when I started the business, A driver would come in and he'd want to sleep for a few hours. We'd hand him a key to room 1, which had 6 other beds in it. And he would go up and open that door, go in, crawl into a bunk next to 5 people he didn't know, didn't have no idea who these people were, would never say a word about it, get up in the morning and go back to work. Try to put 2 people in a room today, let alone 5 or 6 that don't know each other. They'd think you were insane.
They probably would. And you might be. You tried that. So, Jonathan, I'm just talking with Phil. I know that you recently had an interview with him when you unveiled the video for TA's anniversary, for their 50th anniversary. What surprised you most about Phil?
Well, first, thanks for having us, Lisa, Amy, and Phil. It's awesome to see you again. What surprised me? This guy was part of the couple of people who just created an industry, not just creating this company, which, and he's got such a sense of humility. He's been wildly successful in so many other things. And the thing, I don't know if I was surprised at this, but what most impressed me, and it really sticks with me, is when you ask Phil, what his greatest accomplishment or what he's most proud of, he talks about this company. Like, what an amazing, both obligation and just an amazing sense to be here 50 years later and have the chance to kind of carry forward. So, the guy's got more energy than the Energizer Bunny. That was a surprise. He's been around a while, he created this thing 50 years ago. So anyway, I was surprised in many respects, but his humility, his energy, and just a great personality. We really, really connected. You can see it in our video. I think it's very real.
Yes, I definitely got the sense of that. And Phil, I know one of the things that must have made you successful is how down to earth you are. Just like John was just saying. And that's really, it sounds like that's how it all started, was with the drivers and you having relationships with those drivers. Do you think that's as important today for you to have a relationship with your customers as it was to Phil?
Absolutely. And it's now, I think, because of the way the industry has evolved, where there's lots of obviously large fleets, it's important at all levels to have a relationship. I have a driver council. I'm the CEO of this. We're a big public company now. Mm-hmm. I have 10 drivers from 10 fleets that I connect with every quarter to make sure that at my level, I am staying in touch with those people directly, not through layers. Of course, it's equally as important to stay in touch with the CEOs of our biggest customers. And frankly, just last week, we had something called TSAG. It's our Truck Service Advisory Group. We did it offsite. And we had 30 of our biggest fleet customers there, specifically from the truck service area. I had a chance to attend and address them directly. And so at all levels, the customer now has many levels. Back in the beginning, it was maybe a person or two on a truck. And now these are big companies. And it's important at all levels to both, understand their needs. At the end of the day, it's about the drivers, right? We need to serve the people who are pulling in, filling up, showering, et cetera, giving them a clean environment, giving them lots of food options. That's number one. But I also need to make sure that we're aligned with what the people who own the fleets, as well as the people who, let's say, lead different parts of the fleet businesses, including, again, truck service. We need to make sure we're responsive at all levels.
Phil, I'm curious, if you were to start a travel center chain today, how would it be different, or what different skills would you need today versus 50 years ago, or is it not changed?
No, I think it's changed dramatically. The technology is incredible today. We used to advance drivers' money by their company would send them a Western Union wire, and it would come across a little ticker tape, and then we'd write a handwritten check and then hand it to the guy. So everything today is electronic. And with the internet and everything that's going on, your truck stops have to be internet savvy. They have to be internet alive so that the drivers, when they pull in, can get on a good, safe internet thing. So it's dramatically changed in that respect. The other thing that's been a huge change is when I started in the business 50 years ago, the driver was really the purchasing agent. There weren't a lot of credit card programs and stuff. Most of the trucking companies, they weren't as huge as they are today, but even the bigger ones, and a big one then might have had 400 or 500 trucks. They left their terminal with money in their pocket, an advance check, and then they would get advances. They went down the road. So he really was the purchasing agent. So you really had to cater to him. Today, you obviously have to cater to him for your restaurants, the different services you provide. But the fuel, you have to cater to the trucking company. So today, you got to make both of them happy. Back then, you really only had to make the driver happy because he was the purchasing agent.
And back then, what do you see as like your biggest challenges when you were first starting out? What were the difficulties or the barriers to success back then?
Well, credit issues. There were a lot of issues with credit because we didn't have the sophistication of the credit programs that are out there today. So we were doing a lot of internal credit with the companies, and the sophistication wasn't there. So credit was definitely a big issue back then. I think another thing is just the trucks were very antiquated, and the breakdowns were a lot different than they are today. Today, more of the breakdowns are of a technical, computerized type nature. So it's today your mechanic isn't wheeled as many wrenches as he is. He's gotten how to work a computer. So that's been a dramatic change, and the driver has changed too in that respect.
So did you have any advice for John when he came to see you?
Not really. I mean, he laid out their program, and then we went and visited a couple of the facilities, and I think they're doing a great job. They're doing a good job at recognizing and catering to the driver well with the company. I think for a few years, TA lost that along the road. I think they're also doing a good job at recognizing the fact that today we're not only really working to bring in the driver, but we want to bring in the road warrior, the camper people. So it's very important that it looks like a travel center rather than a truck stop. So that's a catering to everybody. And I think they've got that message down, and I think they're doing a good job at it.
Yeah, the industry definitely has a lot of new challenges. One of those, of course, it's always been image, I think, has always been a challenge for our industry. But I also think that we now have new competition. We have, the onset of alternative fuels coming into the market. John, what do you see as your biggest challenges as head of this big company?
Up until recently, we're shifting gears now, but it was some of the catch up that Phil just alluded to a little bit. I think in certain respects, when I got here at the end of 2019, we were behind. We hadn't kept up with sort of the keeping our sites at the level and quality that they deserve. And there are a lot of things like that had fallen behind. So there was a long list of things we had to do to really just play some catch up. Now we've shifted gears where I think we're at a new place. And, a lot of it has to do with, really making sure we're leveraging technology to serve our guests best. And so, the science of understanding our guests, not just put our finger in the air and kind of, we tend to know what our guests think and want. We do, certainly with all the experienced people here, but there's a science to really understanding their behaviors and measuring those things and making sure we're delivering. So it's those sorts of things. You could spend all day long on technology and never really change much. Right now we're starting to use artificial intelligence, believe it or not, and machine learning as part of how we price, say, street diesel. Also, we're going to move that into how we manage our supply into diesel, I should say. And so there's all these opportunities, being careful and making the right choices when it comes to technology so that we're serving customers best, but we're not building such an overhead structure that we're having to increase costs to our guests and our customers. Those are some challenges. And then obviously, you just said it, the future of sustainable and alternative energy. It's something, frankly, I'm really excited about. Our company and what Phil created with he may not have known it at the time, but our brand of a travel center, the larger sites, some of the others in our space are 8 to 10 acres. We're 24 acres on average. Of course, we're on highway pretty exclusively. And so as change comes along, and we don't have big investments in either refineries or into this fuel supply chain, we can be nimble. So we have a unique brand of a travel center again that Phil created. He didn't realize back then, more than it was a matter of having a broad range of amenities. That's why he did it, was the right thing then. Today, it means that too, but it also means we have the physical space to change and have a broad range of fuel offerings, sustainable and fossil, for however long this takes. And the conversion is going to take every bit of several decades. There's no question. For cars, it might happen faster. And that C-store gas business in suburbia, I'm not sure what happens in California to that business in the next 5-7 years. But on the truck side, it's going to take a while. And so we're making cautious, careful investments, the timing of which we're being very careful about. And we're also engaging through NATSO's help and directly ourselves with folks like Secretary Buttigieg and others in DC, making sure we have a seat, both as an industry through NATSO and our friends and competitors, as well as just ourselves, to make sure we have a shot at sort of helping inform what that future ecosystem looks like. So that's a set of challenges, but you can tell I get pretty excited about it too.
Not at all, John. We couldn't tell. So Phil, what was your vision for the company when you first started? And did you have any idea that it would grow to how many locations do you have now, John? 265 or
276, and there's a whole pipeline of others between franchise and ones we're buying that will be well into the low to mid 300s by the end of next year.
Oh, wow. So Phil, did you have any idea that it would grow to this degree?
No, the idea was to have a national chain. And one of the things the truckers were having a problem with early on is they started traveling the whole country. Truckers originally would be working in maybe one or two states. And with deregulation in the interstate highways, trucks were traversing all over the country. They needed one company they could do business with because they were, some states might not even really had a truck stop. They might have a couple gas stations they'd have to stop at. So the concept was to have a national chain where with one credit card, they could fuel their trucks up and get one bill at the end of the month. That was the goal. And initially, obviously, that was too much for one person to take on back then. So I started a credit card, which was called FCS, Fleet Control Services. That eventually got sold to ComData. Actually, it got sold to American Express to begin with. Then the ComData bought it from them. So that was really the original concept, was to create a national chain where a trucking company could rely on, say, one person to service his trucks across the entire country.
Well, I feel really honored to have spoken with you and with John, but with you especially, Phil, because I know that you are, and you probably recall this, NATSO Hall of Fame winner. You were NATSO chairman, I think, when I started at NATSO, I think in 1995. Right. So I've always considered you a mentor and somebody that is completely original. And a lot of the ideas that you had when you were just a young man have resulted in this industry and the growth in this industry. So I thank you for being on with me today and with Amy and John. And John, thank you too.
And Lisa, one of the original founding members. There were 13 of us that started NATSO. You've got that picture in your office somewhere.
Yes, I do. I definitely do.
Thanks, Lisa and Amy, too, for having us. And Phil, it's always great to see you. And it's just such a pleasure to have a chance to connect with you. And so long as you'll take my calls, I'll be bouncing things off of you into this next 50.
Hey, thanks,
and
guys.
Lisa, great talking to you after all these years. And you look the same as you always did, too.
Oh, that's so sweet. I know it's a lie, but I appreciate it anyway.
No, it's good.
I second that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks for listening to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at www.natso.com/podcast. Thanks, guys.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.